Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ameen. Welcome, guys. So, what I mean by learning Arabic like a child, I mean trying to learn Arabic by learning vocab and phrases and so on, especially from native speakers, without learning Nahu and Sarf, grammar and morphology. So basically, learning Arabic by avoiding traditional classroom study and instruction. Learn like a child, right? It sounds kind of easy. A magical new way of learning a language, because after all that Spanish you thought you'd pick up from 4 years of high school, you thought you'd be able to speak the language, but you still can't. So, well, maybe classroom instruction just doesn't work, so let's try something new. It's kind of like the connotations of like learn like a child. It sounds new, it sounds like cutting edge, innovative. It'll pick you up better than any other program you've been in, right? So ditch the classroom style of instruction, and this is what's going to help you, and this is what's going to work. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but I don't agree with that. Other people may have their arguments, but here are my arguments for why I think that doesn't work and why traditional instruction and classroom settings are ideal, but you can also learn online. But traditional instruction is the best way to go in approaching language learning in general, and particularly with the Arabic language as well. So why Spanish didn't at least seem to work? Right. This is a question that I had in my head after high school. Like, oh man, I wish I could just speak and understand Spanish. I lived in El Paso for a couple of years, and it was like, man, even practical usage is available here, and I still can't really understand Spanish, right? And what took me to learn and get fluent in the Spanish language, which I'm still working on, but to be able to become conversant and be able to pick up books and read and so on in Spanish, and to be able to engage with this language on a deeper level. The difference for me was I went and I studied in Guatemala. I studied there for about 11 weeks. 10 of them I was actually studying at a week where I had some trouble. I spent about 10 actual weeks studying Spanish, one-on-one with a teacher. It was 5 hours a day for about 5 days a week. And I came out of there I noticed about 8 weeks, people would become pretty conversant at least. I don't necessarily say fluent, kind of fluent, but they became conversant. They could sit down and at least stumble through a conversation with somebody who is willing to, speak a little bit slower with them, right? So why is that? It's like, 4 years of Spanish, and I feel like I still don't know any Spanish. Am I just bad at learning languages? That's the assumption a lot of people make. I'm just bad at learning languages, right? That's just not true. There's no such thing as somebody who's like bad at learning languages, right? There's some learners just in general with any topic in general where you're going to approach a topic, math, physics, science, Spanish, Arabic, geometry, nutrition, medicine, whatever, nursing, A&P. You're going to find topics that you're maybe a little bit slower at, and you'll find other students that are a little bit ahead of the class, right? It's just a natural, human condition where some people are perhaps a little bit better at learning some things, and perhaps in some ways, and other people are a little bit slower, right? Some people a little bit faster, some people a little slower. But it's not like somebody's just, I'm just bad at learning languages. I'm just behind and this and that and yada, yada. I mean, the difference is, honestly, I don't think they're as stark as people make them out to be. The real factor on your skill with a language is the amount of quality time you've spent with that language, okay? So the Foreign Service Institute of the United States government has a list of languages for native English speakers with timelines to reach what they call professional working proficiency, or level 3 in speaking and writing. So that person can go and work at like an embassy, in this language and be comfortable with it, right? So different categories goes 1 to 4. Category 1, and this is for native English speakers, right? If you're a native speaker of Farsi, this table is going to be completely different for you, right? It could even be like upside down, or if you learn Chinese first, or if you are from Vietnam, or if you're from, anywhere else, Russia, right? This table is going to be very different. So this is for people who learned English as a first language. Okay, keep that in mind. All right, so category 1 languages are where you find your Spanish, right? So they say 24 weeks. That somebody studying, by the weeks, they mean somebody who's in their institute studying full time, learning this language for a professional reason, right? So these category 1 languages, they say at 24 to 30 weeks. The main thing I want you to focus on, though, are the hours. 600 to 750 class hours to reach that level 3 in speaking and writing. So my time in Guatemala, I think I racked up somewhere around 300 hours of instruction and practice and so on. And so I'm about halfway there in terms of the amount of hours I've spent learning this language and studying it, right? I feel like, I could use another maybe 10 weeks learning some Spanish to get a lot better and closer to that academic level I'd like for it to be at. But then you go and look at Arabic, it's category 4 language. It's the hardest category, what they call the super hard languages. So the category 1 are languages more similar to English. You know, you have those Latin-based roots, right? Whereas Arabic is exceptionally difficult for a native English speaker. It's very different. The grammar, the vocabulary, everything is very different in Arabic, right? Even the script. And so here you're looking at 2,200 class hours, right? That's like 4 times the category 1 languages. So the reason why the Spanish class didn't work, 4 years of Spanish, at least what you think, is that actually you really didn't get that many hours of Spanish in high school. You know, and neither did I. I mean, I learned Spanish in high school, right? If you took 4 years of Spanish, I think you only got around 96 hours of classroom instruction. You know, that's really, you only got about 1/6 of what you need to get fluent in Spanish, right? That's the reason why that grade school stuff didn't work. You just think of the requisite hours yet. You still need more practice, need more learning. You barely even scratch the surface, right? And you haven't, you know, I doubt that you've went to Mexico or somewhere in Latin America or Spain and like immerse yourself in the language either as well. So this is the reason why, right? You need more classroom instruction to get fluent. It's a matter of time. It's not a matter of the style of program you're going through, the style of learning, or the style of teaching. Everybody still needs to go through the grammar, the structure of the language. You still need to learn that academic stuff, right? And you still need to learn more vocabulary and study more vocabulary and idioms and so on. It's all basically like the same stuff you're really learning, and the way you learn it perhaps isn't even as important as how much time you spend learning, right? Like some advice that was given to me once when I was beginning my Arabic journey by a teacher at Dar al-Qasim in Chicago, is he said, whatever program you choose, like don't just dabble in different programs, right? Whatever program you choose, like some online program or whatever, just make sure you finish that program. Okay, it's not necessarily as important as what program you choose, but that the fact that you commit to it and you complete it, right? Because they're all going to teach you basically the same thing. They may use different English terms to translate structures of Arabic grammar and stuff, but at the end of the day, the end point is the same. You're all learning the same thing. You just have to go all the way through it. So a quick example, right? Tawakkala and tawakkala. So if you don't know sarf patterns and roots, then you can't even use a dictionary in Arabic, right? So I brought you the dictionary entry for these 2 words, these 2 verbs in Arabic. So if you don't know sarf, or the morphology of the Arabic language, then try to show me in Hans Wehr here the difference between these 2 words if you don't know sarf. Are you able to do it? Because right here we have multiple forms of this word. We have, I'll tell you right now, the first one, tawakkala, that's form 5. Tawakkala, that's form 6. Okay, well now you know how to go down to the V and the VI, the form 5, form 6. And okay, so to be appointed as a representative agent, take over, act as legal representative, right? Take upon oneself, assume, right? Be responsible, answerable, so on, guarantee, warrant. And then form 6, to trust each other, to react with indifference, to be non-committal, indifferent, right? These 2 words are like opposites, really. And you're not really able to even approach this. You're not even able to like dig into these words until you've learned sarf. You can't even use a dictionary yet, right? So learning Nahu and sarf, grammar and morphology, I mean, it's critical to studying the Arabic language. And you can do it through a classroom. At some point, you got to sit down and learn the 10 forms, right? There's no way of getting around that if you really want to approach the Arabic language. And people can tell you literal definitions of tawakkul and tawakkul, right? They can explain it to you and so on, but at the end of the day, you're not really able to personally explore this language and get in and dig into this language until you sat down and studied that classroom style instruction and studied the core of this language and the roots of this language. So a native speaker will naturally have a massive vocabulary list. So harking back to the hours of exposure to a language before in that chart that I showed you. So imagine, how many hours in your own personal native language have you spent with that language? You're spending your whole life with that language. By the time you reach age 10, you've acquired thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of English, or whatever your native language is, of exposure, right? Imagine if you had 10,000 hours of Spanish, right? You'd be at a native level, or 10,000 hours of Arabic. You'd be a master of the Arabic language, right? So likewise, when it comes to a native teacher or a native Arabic speaker, they may not even know the 10 forms of Arabic in an academic sense. You may even be able to ask them hey, what does tawakkul mean or tawakkul mean, right? And they'll be able to tell you if they're an English speaker as well. They'll be able to tell you and even explain the differences and so on. And they even have typically native Arabic speakers will have a deeper understanding of Arabic than someone who's like us, learning academically, right? However, they may not even be able to tell you what wazn, that word is at, what sarf form, what morphology form that word is at. They'll be like, I don't know, but I know that this means this and this, right? But they can't tell you academically why it means that necessarily. What connotations does form 6 typically have and form 5 and so on, right? But they know the pattern and what it sounds like and what it kind of feels like, right? Because they've had just so many hours of exposure to that language and learned it early on when you have a lot of that neuroplasticity as a child, right? But at the end of the day, you're not a native speaker of Arabic, right? If you're here, you're probably not a native speaker of Arabic. You're trying to learn Arabic, right? You're not 3 years old. Your mom and dad aren't Arabic speakers, right? So throughout history, pretty much of all of humanity, you learn a language through basically the same way. You learn the structure of the language. You learn vocabulary. You read. You talk with people, and you immerse yourself in the language. And you're not going to get around that, right? So I'll give you a story. I remember Dr. Ross down here. He's a professor at TCU. So he used to study and teach at Qasid in Jordan. It's probably the most well-known Arabic institute in the world. And one thing he told us was that when he was studying there, a lot of students were trying all kinds of things, right? One person was like, I'm gonna try this, trying to find new ways of learning Arabic, right? These, learn like a child, learn like this, learn like that, whatever. All these new ways, right? So people tried all kinds of things. Some people would be like, I'm just gonna go and I'm just gonna speak with Arabs all day, just chat all day, and just try to absorb this language through osmosis and just being around it, right? And they tried all kinds of different things. I'm just gonna listen to whatever all day or whatever, all kinds of different things. I can't remember all the examples he gave us, right? But at the end of the day, what the conclusion all of them came to was that none of that worked, right? At the end of the day, you just need to study and put in the time and effort, right? And the more time you spend studying, the easier it will go. It's like a snowball, right? You have your tiny snowball, you push and roll it, you didn't gather a whole lot of snow, right? Whereas when you get this big snowball, you give it one rotation, you just picked up a bunch of snow, right? It compounds as you go. At the beginning is hard. As you go, it gets easier, especially once you get over that and those initial 2 humps. The first hump is getting over just the basic Nahu and Sarf that you learn through your introductory texts or whatever program you use. The next one is getting over those classical texts and starting to read and vowel Arabic unvoweled texts. And then once you get over that hump, it gets a lot easier. It's kind of like rolling a snowball downhill now. Right now it's kind of fun to learn. Once you get over those humps, then it's okay, it's a lot easier to do, right? But initially, it is very difficult. And even in Guatemala, when I was studying Spanish, my Spanish improvement still depended on how hard I studied and how much time I spent with the teacher, studying, reading, looking up words, and practicing with locals, right? And so far, I've never actually met somebody who can fluently speak or understand a second language who didn't go through traditional instruction. So one question is like, what is your goal? Are you learning Arabic to read classical texts, which is, the focus of my channel and my website? Are you trying to engage in just conversation, travel, casual kind of fun learning, or some other reason that you want to speak Arabic and converse in it? Or for business, you're trying to learn, converse, and speak Arabic for business reasons, or like for a government job or something like that. So what is your goal? And this will determine your approach to studying the language. Some may be more reading focused, like what we're doing, and maybe more conversation focused, like what the Foreign Service Institute would do. So depending on your goal, depend on the focus of your language learning, right? There's reading, there's writing, there's listening, there's speaking, there's 4 domains of language learning, and which of those you focus on more will depend on your goal. Some basic tips: you need to learn vocab, nahu, and sarf, not just like atomized vocabulary and phrases, my ball and this and that and yada yada. Like that stuff's kind of fun, but really I just don't feel like it actually gets anywhere. And maybe I'm wrong. You have a study or something that shows I'm wrong, I'm perfectly fine. I'm perfectly open to changing my mind, right? But I just don't think it's really helpful to learn that type of stuff. I think it's more helpful to go through the language and then learn these phrases and idioms and how Arabs speak and spending time with native speakers and so on once you've already completed that core study, right? Another is make mistakes, right? Making mistakes is really important to language learning. You got to be comfortable with mistakes. You have to be open to making mistakes. Laugh it off, joke, whatever. Make lots of mistakes. That's how you learn. You learn, well, that's not how they say it. They say it this other way, right? So make lots and lots of mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, then you're not putting in any effort. If you're not putting any effort, you're not going to learn anything. Repetition. Repeat the same thing. Read a text twice, 3 times. You'll pick up on things you didn't see the last time. Repeat lessons, go over your old notes, textbooks, and so on. Repetition is very helpful because you'll fill in the gaps that you missed the first time, and you'll solidify vocabulary and so on. Immersion, if possible, after your basics can be very helpful, right? Speaking with those native speakers, because native Arab, especially with the Arabic language in particular, it's so intricate. Native speakers, even like a native Egyptian speaker, even if he's using his dialect, through pretty much his whole life, he'll still know things about the Arabic language that someone who's learning as a second language just won't know, right? He knows the idioms, the phrases, the uses, and things like that, which are very important to learn. And the easiest way to learn them, I think, is through immersion, right? Now, reading text is very helpful and useful, but that immersive interaction can be very helpful as well to deepening your understanding of a language. So a very basic Arabic learning path: begin with studying Nahu and Sarf formally in a structured program. Begin with a contemporary text, complete it, or like a series of texts or something, complete it, and then get into classical texts like the Ajurumiyya, right? You don't want to begin with the Ajurumiyya when you haven't actually learned any of this stuff yet, right? It's going to be very confusing. The Ajurumiyya is more like a reference than something to just pick up and learn right off the bat. It's very hard. You can do that, but it's very hard to understand that way if you haven't covered the basics through like a contemporary text, which is designed for like an English speaker to learn Arabic grammar and sarf. So study vocab all along the way. Vocab, you're going to be learning that like the whole rest of your Arabic life, okay? Vocab is all along the way, right? Focusing on vocab initially, maybe a couple words here and there picking up that you're going to be using, but getting that Nahu and Sarf, that core knowledge out of the way is really important. And then lots of guided reading, listening, immersion, interacting with native speakers. The a lot of the quality of immersion just comes from interacting with native speakers, right? Now, it may not necessarily necessitate going to Jordan for a few months or a year or something, which would be very helpful, but not everybody has that available to them, right? Not everybody can just dip out, for a year or something. But what can be helpful is where are native Arabic speakers in your area, your local mosque. Maybe it turns out some Arab guys like to hang out after, the Isha prayer or something like that. And you just hang out with them for, 15, 20 minutes and just listen to the conversations, ask questions, talk with people, especially like ideally if you're with a native Arabic speaker who also speaks English and they can break things down and explain things. And especially if they're actually interested in the Arabic language and they've studied it and they've learned it and they can teach you kind of as it goes, right? That is very, very helpful. I would even say necessary to be connected with at least one person who's like a native Arabic speaker, and they've studied the language, they like the language, and they can actually explain to you like the grammar behind a sentence and stuff like that. That can be somebody very, very good, important contact to have. And then just read more, continue to read, One thing about reading is like, you look at a book and it's like, once I read 50 pages of this, I wonder how far I'll be, But really, don't just think of the end goal, think of the process. You're gonna have to read a whole lot, like, hundreds of pages to make like significant improvement in Arabic. The reading will get easier as you go. Once you've gone through 100 pages, 20, even 5 pages, 20 pages, 40 pages, it'll get a lot easier to read and to vowelize a text. And as you go, the phrases, the idioms, the vocabulary, you'll start to pick up on it as you go. But this stuff is going to take, it takes years. It takes it takes about 2.5 years to like really begin to learn Arabic, And so just keep that in mind and focus on the process, not the end goal, and trust the process. So thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below, ask a question, or add to the discussion or something like that. Visit our website for more tips, book and program reviews, ask a question, join our Telegram group, and sign up for weekly email updates. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.